Hello and welcome to Belpod, the podcast dedicated to Belarusian football. This week we'll take a closer look at an extraordinary outburst from Belarus's answer to Colin Moynihan and discuss the latest developments in the ongoing Team 16 saga. Then our good friend Dan will sit down for a fascinating chat with the Scot Neman Grodno fan before we return for a general round of the transfer news and their potential effect on the 2021 season. Hello again, and welcome to our latest chat about the BPL and all things connected to it. And I know not all of you are massively keen on the whole politics and politicians angle, but the comments of the sports minister recently, John, and their wider implications are something that we just didn't feel that we could ignore altogether. Really, quite remarkable statements from a curious gentleman, shall we say?
Yeah, this is Sergei Kowalczyk, the Minister for Sports and Tourism in Belarus. And he made, at the end of last week, having been gunning for football for about 10 days and summoned all the coaches and high hegians for a harangue at the House of Football, he had an interview or article in Tribuna where he basically accused the national team of being insufficiently patriotic, of looking at their shoes as the national anthem was playing. He accused the national team captain, Stashevich, of completely failing in his mission. I'm not quite sure what his mission is particularly. He says the attitude of the team is poor, that footballers have been spoiled with too much money. And strangely, he praises Vitaly Lisakovich, who's now at Lokomotiv Moscow, saying that he has the right attitude and really wants to get stuck in, and everyone should be more like Lisakovich. So a very bizarre outburst. And for those of you who don't know Mr. Kowalczyk, he looks like an irritable accountant who's been beaten to the last carton of prune juice in Morrison's. You know, he's the sort of permanently raging guy. And it's just bizarre, isn't it, Liam, the sort of intervention from a politician?
Extraordinary. I also find it quite amusing. You should cite Lisakovich as a bastion of all things that we should follow. Although I did read an interview with Lisakovich the other day saying, "I've calmed down a bit. I felt like saying, I hate to think what you were like before that." But yeah, no, quite extraordinary. And just the whole, we just can't imagine it, can we, in this country? We can't imagine the sports minister laying into Gareth Southgate, or more importantly, laying into Vardy and all the rest of it. Or in your case, obviously, the sports minister laying into whoever they might lay into in the Scottish team. You know, it's just completely inappropriate and frankly laughable. No relation to the Dinamo Brest manager then?
No, none at all. Dinamo Brest manager is a very elegant individual compared to this moth-eaten wee man. But of course, this is related to the fact that football has remained largely silent in supporting the government. The footballers have really kept their counsel in the political troubles in the country. And I think last autumn, this was badly interpreted. There was even a mock-up picture in Tribuna of the starting 11 for the national team all wearing riot police-style balaclavas because they refused to condemn what was going on. But the longer time's gone on, clearly the more frustrated the regime has come with footballers refusing to speak out in their support. And I think this is all related, you know, the massive cut in funding, the sudden interest in the structure of football and the earnings of footballers, the farcical obsession with whether teams are traveling abroad for a training camp or not. So in Belarus, everything is interconnected, given the huge involvement of the state in football. So that's where this is coming from.
I know we've both felt at times, you know, in terms of the politics, in terms of football, in terms of continuing to watch Belarusian football at a time when obviously the country is in political turmoil. I think lots of people being critical of anybody who's prepared to carry on watching. But, you know, ultimately, when you think about this, if the footballers are taking the easy option here, John, if the footballers are just, wholeheartedly stood in favour of the regime, then a lot of these problems wouldn't be happening, and shouldn't it in some ways be interpreted as a pretty strong and courageous stand of the footballers to not actually come out, because it would be much easier. I mean, their budgets have all been slashed as a consequence. They're gonna get hurt by this. Ultimately, I don't think that the argument that says we can't watch this league because of what's going on off the field. I actually think that the football as a whole in Belarus deserves our support more than ever, because this is exactly the kind of stand I would hope that any body of people who had the opportunity to take a stand would take.
Well, yeah, and funding is being cut by up to 70%, apparently, in some cases. The individual who runs the Krumkachi official Twitter account put up a joking tweet 2 weeks ago after Kowalczuk's first speech saying funding being cut by 70%, but not for us, haha, because of course they're privately run and they couldn't care less whether the state cuts money or not. I've got to be honest, when things were really bad last August and September, I did stop watching. And I just felt that it was somehow inappropriate. But I do agree with you, given that football now seems to be inching towards a space where it doesn't want to accommodate the regime, or at least vocally support it, then it is the right thing to do to back up the footballers and supporters in the country who are trying to keep going in very difficult circumstances.
And of course, an offshoot of this may yet be a very positive offshoot, in the sense that with funding so dramatically cut, as we've talked about in the past, in terms of promoting youth football and everything. I think obviously that's a rather convenient excuse for the sports minister. We'll take all your funding to encourage you to promote youth football. But it may yet be that the national team, which he has been so critical of, benefits from the fact that far more young Belarusians will have to be given the opportunity, because there is no money to pay for the more expensive imports, etc.
The sad thing is that by the time the national team starts to take an upward turn, everyone will have forgotten who Sergei Kowalczuk is, and hopefully Lukashenko too with him. The Belarusian 21s and 17s are really not in a good place at the moment. We saw that with the 17s being turned over by giants like Moldova and Tajikistan in the recent pre-season tournament. And the 21s don't have much going for them. So there's really not a lot coming through in the national team's few age groups. So any change that's brought about by any putative reinvestment of scarce resources in children's football will take a generation to work its way through, which is a shame, really, because when we've all seen the league, we've all seen the caliber of Belarusian players playing abroad, your Shkurins, your Lizakoviches, until recently Volodkos. These are really good players. And the national team should be doing much, much, much better. The historical parallel I draw is with the Romanian team, which in the second part of the 1980s were nowhere in the last years of Ceausescu. And then, of course, in 1990, once Ceausescu had fallen, they did really well in Italia 90. And then, of course, I think made the latter stages of USA 94. So we have to wait and see how the politics works out and what effect all this debate will have on the national team's fortunes.
We have to have one more mention of politics before we move on to transfers, etc., because obviously the whole issue of Team 16 has yet to be resolved, and clearly that is also enmeshed in the whole Belarusian political sphere in terms of whether they'll let Krumkachi go up. Now, the last thing we heard on this was that Krumkachi might yet still be offered a chance if Smorgon considered not suitable. Again, we're looking at maybe 3-4 weeks, not even 3 weeks to start the season that we're talking about here, aren't we? And still we don't know.
Farcical. Krumkachi, there was an article yesterday where a journalist called Dmitry Silvestruk floated the idea that Krumkachi could still go up if Smorgon either refused to be licensed for the top league or fail licensing for some reason. that is the only right decision to promote cream catching. It's logical, and we all know the reason why they're being ignored. I would say that there has been some pro-Smorgon stuff from other officials too. Yuri Puntus said in an interview that he was perfectly relaxed about Smorgon coming up, that they were a good club. The managers of the top flight seem to be really concerned not to run with a 15-team league. They really don't want a couple of idle Saturdays in the season. And the chairman of the ABFF, Mr. Bazanov, is playing his cards very close to his chest. He says, "We'll decide when we decide. I'm very relaxed about running with 15. Let's see what happens." That was his last comment on the subject. Natural Justice hopes that Kroomkatje and Oleg Dulup, who did a wonderful interview in Tribuna today about the club and his career and his views on a lot of things, those guys should be in the top flight, no doubt about it. If Smorgon go up, it will sit badly, and I think they'll go straight back down. They don't have the squad for the top flight. They've got a mediocre second-tier squad. So let's see how it plays.
Right. Okay. So 2 and a bit episodes into our new venture, we decided it was time for you to have the opportunity to finally stop listening to us. And we welcome back an old friend of ours who was very involved in Stay Energetic. In fact, started the whole Energetic BGU online presence in social media. Dan, many of you may know him if you followed Stay Energetic before arriving at Belpont via Stay Energetic. If you don't know him, we're delighted to have him back involved in the show. And he's gone out this week to find one of our first guest, in fact, on the show, which is a Neman fan. As promised, thank you very much to Scott for being involved in this new venture for our show. And sit back now, please, and enjoy Dan's interview with Scott.
Scott, welcome.
Hello. Good evening.
Let me start by asking what's probably the most obvious question. What got you into Belarusian football? I mean, it wouldn't have anything to do with a global pandemic and national lockdown, would it?
So, good guess. No, well, yeah, literally was. Yeah, 2020 lockdown. It was that, and because I support a low league Scottish team, we also had no football there. So it was pretty much, I saw it on Twitter, saw it on YouTube, and figured I needed some football to watch. And it was the only football on the planet, as far as I know at that point. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think we found out later there was a couple of other random leagues that weren't quite as well supported.
Honduras was on.
Yeah, but at least in Belarus, they support it with YouTube and whatnot. They made it accessible, I guess. And that makes sense as far as to supporting the league, but why Neman? What drew you into them?
So the first game of the season, literally the first team that I saw was Neman Grodno, so I picked him. Simple as that.
Is this how you usually do things? Literally the first of anything, that's it? That's what you're committing yourself for life?
Honestly, that's pretty much how it goes. First thing I see of anything.
That's fair enough. I mean, we've all got random reasons. I picked Energetic purely because I thought I knew their name and found out later I was completely mispronouncing it. So, we all have our reasons. How did you feel about last season? It was your first season. It's a whole new league. I mean, to be perfectly honest, in the same competition that I was in, we don't really know the league that well. We don't necessarily know the rules. There's some really random rules as well about if you're on the same points and who goes where who.
Yeah, on head-to-head as opposed to
exactly
a goal scored and all that. Yeah.
How did you find the first season? I mean, just from a generic point of view rather than from a naming point of view, how did you find adapting to that?
To be honest, I actually really enjoyed it. And I didn't actually figure out about the head-to-head rule until pretty much the end of the season, until it was mentioned that, obviously we had a good chance of qualifying for Europe, but our goal difference was worse than a few teams below us. And I'm like, wait a minute. And it wasn't until somebody flagged it up that I learned this. Like, I literally didn't learn it until most of the way through the season.
Okay, so looking back then from a very Neman specific point of view, what would you say was the highlights of the season for yourself?
It's got to be Gig and Cadmian, hasn't it? Like, just the Armenian Messi. He was. I mean, he lit up that league. A lot of teams and a lot of fans of different teams will say the same thing. He was an incredible player. I mean, don't get me wrong. He's lasted one season. He's now away. But he was incredible. And then obviously just following Neman doing what they did. Like Neman class of 2020, I think is going to take some beating. I think Neman seriously overachieved last season. I mean, they've had success before, but it's been sporadic. Whereas, last season, I don't know if it was because they had backing from other countries. I don't know. But they just did a lot better than I think a lot of people expected them to do as well. Even their own fans said the same thing, sort of thing.
So obviously a lot to hope for next season because you were in the almost runs, if you will. There's an opportunity there. If other teams don't bolster and you carry on, there might be an opportunity to push on. Who are you seeing looking forward into the next season that you think will be a threat, if you will, to that?
I think Torpedo are going to be stronger, I think, this season. I think, again, Shakhtar, Bate, I think they'll be there or thereabouts. Personally, I don't think we're going to do as well as we did last season. I think we'll be 6th or 7th is my prediction. You heard it here first. That's my prediction for this season. I don't think we're going to be as high. I think we've lost a lot of good players.
So if I bet on you being 8th or below, you'll be paying me out, will you?
A $5 on it now, mate. Yeah.
Obviously, no player is bigger than any team, but at the same time, every team is built on players. And we've seen quite a number of players moving in and out of the league. How has that impacted on Neman?
Well, I think every Neman fan, to be honest, will agree. Kadmian leaving is massive. He was our main man last season. He was one of the best players in the league. And then again, in my opinion, I don't know if this is the same right across, but I think Maricic is going to be a huge, huge loss. Big striker up front, scored a lot of goals, created a lot of problems, a big guy. And then when we brought Poe in, Jean-Marie Poe in the summer, he was excellent. He caused a lot of problems in the wing. Whereas the players that I think we've brought in this season, I was watching the friendly against FC Minsk, and we brought in Yuri Kozlov. Whereas when I was watching the game, I wasn't convinced by him at all. He just didn't look fit. He didn't look... Yeah, I don't know. He just didn't look as good as the guys that we've lost. Roman Gabrowski, when he came on, I thought was excellent against his old team. I thought he looked really good, but I just don't think these guys have got the same quality. I know it's only a friendly, but I just don't think they've got the same quality that the guys we've lost had. But it'll be interesting to see, I think, this season, how we do, especially with the new guys and how quickly they gel. Because from what I've heard anyway, there's more coming in, but I don't know yet. No, it'll be interesting to see because, as I said, we have lost a lot of players, and it's been well documented on social media as well that we have lost a lot of players very quickly. And we seem to sign 4 guys very, very quickly. So we signed Jigger, Kozlov, Stepanov, and Grabowski, and they all come in within 1 day. As you mentioned before when we were talking, that obviously a lot of deals in Belarus are done before, but it makes you wonder. Have these been lined up with the knowing other players are going, knowing our better players are going? I don't know. There's something about it that I don't know. I just don't think they're the same quality. I don't think that they'll work quite the same, but I might be wrong. I don't know. We'll see.
I'm going to give you an opportunity now. Rate your top 3 teams. Ranked. What are we looking at for next season?
I think Shakhtar will do it again.
Shakhtar number 1.
Yep. Bate 2, Torpedo 3. That's my top 3.
Okay. Well, we can work with that. And from my own personal point of view, where are you putting Energetic?
6th.
Interesting. Okay. I'll take. Yeah. We'll work with that. Okay,
I don't think they'll be near the bottom. I can see Sputnik. I think will just go straight back down. I can't see them doing anything. I think Gomel will do all right because they've got a big backing. They've got money behind them. I think FC Minsk will be near the bottom. I think it'll be mid-table. I think it'll be thereabouts where we are.
Fair enough.
I guess.
Well, I'm hoping we'll speak again this season because it's been genuinely a pleasure. And if anyone wants to follow you on social media, what's your social media handle?
It is at Neman Glasgow.
So, thought-provoking stuff, John. I mean, I can't not mention the fact that he thinks Energetic going to finish sixth. I would absolutely bite his hand off for that.
I think Coach Vladimir and Anatoly Pavlovich would love that too. I think it'll secretly be happened with sixth bottom this season. I can't see anything other than a long season of struggle for Energetic as the squad is set up at the moment. But yes, a very interesting interview and, very thought-provoking in terms of the loss of some real stars for Neman Grodno. And how Igor Kavalovic is beginning to reshape his squad for the 2021 season. How do you see Neman doing, Liam?
Well, I have to say, I don't want any football fan to have to come on the show and be generally quite pessimistic about the chances. But I think he was absolutely right to suggest that they overachieved last season. I think their squad was a good squad, but I don't think it was an amazing squad. I think a top six finish was a fantastic achievement with the resources that he had. I did find it interesting. He didn't mention Zabalin as somebody he was particularly sorry to lose. I kind of share his feelings on Zabalin. I mean, how on earth he's ended up at Shakhtar was quite beyond me. But yeah, I think he's probably about right. I think they will finish mid-table. I think they'll be less well off than they were last season. They've clearly lost some major talents. I'm interested to see how Kozluk plays out. I was quite amused to see that he mentioned that he wasn't that impressed with Kozluk. And then I read up about the tournament, the pre-season tournament that Kozluk had been involved in. And he was named Neman's player of the tournament. So let's hope that they saw something that Scott didn't see. But overall, do you think he's right to be a bit pessimistic?
No, I think in fairness to Kozlov, he was playing in the relegation playoff with Sliutsk on the 15th and 19th of December. So if he looked a wee bit unfit, it's probably because they allowed him to come back a wee bit later to do pre-season than maybe some of the other players. I think also we have to acknowledge that Neman have a really good core still, even though they've lost the A-listers, you might call them. Kadimian, Marusic, Zabalin, these guys are all away, and any side would miss three such big players. They've still got Dudar in goal, who I think was really overlooked last season, one of the steadiest and most competent keepers in the league. Big Vasiliev, the bearded assassin at the back, very consistent player. They've signed Nikita Stepanov from Torpedo, good player and good left back. They've got Georgi Kantaria, who's quite versatile across the back, the Georgian. Where I would worry about Neman at the moment is up front. I know Scott was praising Roman Grybowski, and he's a good player. He carried Minsk in the first part of last season, but they don't really have anyone else up front. So if Igor Kavalovic has still got a few spare rubles in the biscuit tin, then he really needs to be investing in a striker, I think. The other interesting thing for me, Liam, is that they had a bunch of boys in on trial, including astonishingly a VV Putin from Ukraine, Viktor Putin in this case. But these guys have not been signed not yet anyway. So he's not desperate. He's waiting for the right player to come along, as you'd expect a coach like Kavalovic to do. He's not just going to sign anyone for the sake of making up the numbers. And I think they've a decent squad, and I think Scott saying, a good solid mid-table, I think that's about right,
I must admit, I loved Vasiliev last year. I thought he was great. One of my favourite players, and very, very recognisable, as you say, and tough as nails, and really, really decent player. I mean, I do hope. I mean, I think lots of UK Belarusian fans have a bit of a soft spot for Neman, don't they? Because of such a fantastic run against the odds last year, and it does seem to be, very passionate supporters, very well-run club. I did notice also, like you, there were a vast number of trialists that they took this pre-season tournament, and yet very few of them seem to have been signed at the end of it. So you're right, he seems to be biding his time. I think it's I think he'd probably settle for a mid-table, wouldn't he? I mean, ultimately, as he said, they haven't had a massively successful history. They had a great year last year. If they can consolidate on that, as long as they don't go too far the other way and end up, fighting relegation, I think most Neman fans are probably happy with that.
Yeah.
So overall, in terms of, we always keep an eye on the transfers, and there's been quite a lot going on as always. It doesn't seem to stop, does it? Any particular transfers though, John, that have really caught your eye over the last couple of weeks since we last spoke?
Well, the big one for me is Maxim Volodko going back to Bata. People who follow football in the wider region will have seen that FC Tambov in Russia have no money, are on the verge of liquidation, and all their players are leaving. And Volodko has come back to Bata. I think that's a big signing for them. And in ordinary years, they wouldn't have been able to bring him back. That for me is interesting. Sergei Ignatevich has finally signed for FC Minsk after a long trial there. Slavia Mozer have signed a couple of players in the last fortnight. Perhaps the most interesting is Andrei Oshanik from Krumkachi. He was one of their better players last season and stood out in the second tier. So it'll be very interesting to see how he gets on down in Moser. I suppose the big moves, though, Liam, really in terms of transfer news, are not to clubs within Belarus, but are to clubs who play next door in Poland, aren't they? With Godfrey Stephen signing for Jagiellonia, and the rumour that the Yak, who we keenly hope would sign for a big club like a Dynamo Minsk or someone to keep him in the league, is apparently moving to Legia Warsaw. I mean, what do you make of those moves?
I think it's fascinating. I really do. There's been a lot of talk, hasn't there, about perhaps these kind of players won't be coming to the Belarus league anymore because they're the legionnaires, as they call them. The massively well-paid players. I see entirely the opposite happening here. I find it fascinating that two players who lit up our league last year, but who would have heard of them at the start of the season? And they've come into what is clearly a tough league. I don't think either of them would have been on their massive contracts, and I think that that's actually, although clearly the way forward for the national team, as we've said, and everything in terms of improving the league is probably still going to be getting more decent young Belarusians to stay in Belarus and get more playing time in the BPL teams. Mm-hmm. I think these are fascinating stories because they suggest that it is still a fantastic breeding ground for really good players to go on and sign for. I mean, Legia Warsaw are a really big club, and Jagiellonia are no mugs either. So I kind of hope, although I want to make sure that things improve for Belarusian footballers, and I'm quite encouraged by the whole limiters and everything. I think it suggests that we will see decent young players coming to the BPL, and I don't think that can be a bad thing as long as there's some sort of limit, as long as we're not flooded with cheap substandard imports from other leagues. I mean, these are two standout success stories for the BPL as far as I'm concerned.
I agree with you, and I'll be keeping a close eye on Jagiellonia because there's a Bata versus Izloch battle there now, of course, isn't there? Because Jagiellonia also signed Bojan Nastic from Bata before they signed Godfrey Stephen. I mean, there were rumours that Red Star Belgrade and a club in Portugal were after.
Guimarães. It was Guimarães, wasn't it? Yeah, Vitória Guimarães. Yeah.
And, that's kind of the calibre of player we're looking at. I really liked watching Godfrey Stephen. He's a wonderful athlete. He made running and the hard work of a full-back, wing-back look very easy. And he did stand out in what was quite a good, competitive, but inconsistent Izloch team last year. My money is on Godfrey Stephen winning that battle with Nastic and playing more than Nastic does. Jagiellonia are clearly building up a hefty squad, good cover in every position. But I would expect if he stays clear of injury for Godfrey to get the regular starting spot there for the big games. As for Yakshiboyev, as you said, Liam, he was in buttons at Energetic. Those boys are paid absolutely nothing, and it's a short window for them to go on and win the bigger deal, as he did with Shakhtar Soligorsk. But Legia Warsaw is a different league altogether, and I'll be really curious to see how he does, because he strikes me as a confidence player and a player that needs to be happy to play well. He's clearly really enjoyed his time at Energetic. He had some good mates there. Didn't enjoy himself at all at Shakhtar, even though he did quite well there. He certainly didn't disgrace himself by any stretch of the imagination. But Legia, he'll need to bide his time and work his way into that team. He won't be an automatic pick as he was with both his Belarusian clubs, will he?
No, absolutely not. I think it's interesting you should mention about, the whole kind of having mates and what you might move on to. I saw a picture of Shakbar Umarov this week at his training camp in Turkey that he wasn't supposed to be going to. And I was thinking, I wonder if he thinks back to where he was 12 months ago, Umarov. He was essentially, he must have been again on buttons at Energetic. He cut the pitch, didn't he? They used to send him off to cut the pitch with the lawnmower and things like that. He was. They all do their bit, don't they, at Energetic? And 12 months later, he sat there, in a resort in Turkey, training with a team that's won the league 12 of the last 14 years. So, the dream will continue to live on for players that come to Belarus. That's, even within the league, he stayed within the league, and he's gone onwards and upwards, hasn't he? As a result, really, of one goal probably against Bate. Very convenient team against you to score a 35-yard pile driver.
And he scored another one of those in their friendly against Dynamo Kiev, wasn't it? They got turned over 5-2, but okay, Dynamo Kiev are much further on in pre-season than Bate. But yes, you're quite right. It is interesting thinking back to the Energetic squad of 12 months ago. You've now got Umarov and Nosko at Bata, Dushan Bakic at Dynamo Minsk, Yakshiboyev supposedly signing for a massive club in Legia Warsaw. So David Twe now at Rook, having had a brief spell at Dynamo. So that's exactly Vladimir and Anatoly's system working, turning these guys around and making them attractive for bigger clubs and taking the money from those.
I have to say, I was fascinated by Scott's prediction, obviously, when Dan pinned him down to a 1-2-3 in the league. You didn't seem to have made any comment in your comments after the interview about who his second place team was, and the complete absence of Dynamo Minsk from the shake-up. I'm amazed you let that pass, John. I mean, I certainly couldn't wait to mention Energetic finishing sixth, apparently. You did seem to be your mid-table prediction about it. I mean, let's not forget, Dragun signed this. We didn't sign him as he was already there, but he hasn't left. He's going to be their captain next season. They've just signed a fantastic player who's got a fantastic pedigree from, sadly, a team that's going bust. But, Barca, would you like to revise your prediction, John?
Yeah, I would actually. I think they'll be fifth now.
Oh, you generous sort, you.
Yeah. No, I think that's Volodko signings potentially a game changer, and they've still not offloaded Skavish. So even if they've only got Skavish for half a season, I mean, he was the league's top scorer last year, and I think he could be a critically important player for them if, for whatever reason, his rumoured transfer options don't materialise. So they're looking okay. Obviously, a bit of a mix and match team of some trusted faces from previous years and a new type of guy, your Noskos and your Umarovs. But I still don't see them breaking the top four. The top four I'm sticking, and the one Scott left out, and I didn't want to take him to task for it, but Dynamo Minsk. Listen, I had a strange feeling all last year, and it lasted too long for it to be mere indigestion, that Shakhtar were going to win the league, and they did. They made heavy weather of it, but they did. I just got a funny feeling about Dynamo Minsk this year. I think Shakhtar have signed too many players. They've taken too many risks. They've broken up a successful side without really needing to, offloaded a lot of their better players. Whereas Dynamo have gone about their business very quietly, added some real quality, players of the caliber of Putzilo, for example. They still need to find a striker, but if they crack the striker, despite Kuchuk's total indifference to anything north of the midfield, then they're right up there. So I think 1-2 is Shakhtar and Dinamo in whatever order, Rook and Torpedo just outside that. And then there is a whole clutch of clubs from Bata down to your Slavias and Vitebsk who could finish anywhere between 5th and 11th, 12th, and then a small group of strugglers at the bottom.
So it's like a session on Bate for Mr. Blackwood. Going from one team, actually, that, perhaps it isn't going to turn out quite as bad as we thought it would for them. Well, I think we can't really end the show without talking about another team who, while still clearly faced with some challenging times ahead, perhaps the future's looking just a little bit brighter for them in Dinamo Brest.
Yeah, they're beginning to sign a few players finally. Root cast-offs in the main. Stepanov, fine goalkeeper. I don't know. We've said before, we don't really understand why Root got rid of him. Vitaly Gajducic, I think, has been signed. A couple of other boys from the Root fringes. They'll build up a decent enough squad. Nikolai Kadasevich wrote a very interesting article about them late last week, where he said, look, Dinamo are just going to have to get used to a much smaller budget and a much fainter hope of honours. But provided the support is patient and willing to accept that reality for a while, then Dinamo should be absolutely fine. I certainly don't see them being in the top 6, but also I don't see them being bothered by relegation or anything like that. And as you know yourself, when a club is challenged, as Dinamo have been in the close season, it often brings everybody together, the manager, a small squad, what will still be a very passionate fan base. And there'll be a sense of togetherness there that might just pull them through a lot of difficult moments this season. So I think we can say that Dinamo have maybe turned a corner a bit in terms of their signings, and in a couple of weeks' time, we'll have a better idea yet of how they're lining up for the season ahead.
They may pick up some players from this tournament that's being hosted, isn't it, in the next few days, isn't there?
That's right. An interesting tournament that they're hosting, I think, with Slavia Moser and their sort of third-tier farm club, Dinamo Brest 1960, and a couple of interesting teams from West Africa. So I'm sure they've been invited along to, put some players in the shop window, and who knows, there might be one or two guys in there that could help Dinamo. Maybe there'll be someone of quality that they can pick up.
So we know, we're well aware that as we draw to the end of episode 3, we have made scant mention of Izluch, one of the best supported teams that, as far as I can see, outside of Belarus. There is a good reason for this. So we're very hopeful we're going to get at least one, if not two, Izluch fans on our next show. So please, if you have waded through 3 episodes now and thought, why aren't they talking about Izluch? We promise we will, we don't promise, but we will be trying our very best to make up for that next week by inviting some people on who are real experts in that team. So thank you again for your support in listening to this show tonight, and we'll be back soon.
Great, yes, thanks for listening again, and look forward to seeing you next time.